The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
The mind of Pat Popolizio is a wondrous thing. And for you Pac wrestling fans, you'll get to go inside the mind of the Skip each and every episode here on the Pac Mentality Pop-Ins podcast. Now, here's your host, NC State Director of Athletics Digital Communications, Ryan Reinhardt.
Welcome to a brand new in-season episode of the Pac Mentality Pop-Ins podcast. I'm your host, NC State Director of Digital Communications, Brian Reinhardt, and back from a quick trip across the pond over to Budapest and back is the head coach of the Wolfpack, Pat Popolizio.
Good to be back, Brian.
Lots to cover in this episode. Again, busy time of the year for the NC State wrestling team as the season gets underway this weekend. So we're going to cover all that in a few. But Pat, as I mentioned that great open that I just read, you're fresh off of a trip to Budapest, Hungary, where you went to watch Nick Gwiazdowski compete at the 2018 World Championships. And great news for Nick and the Wolfpack RTC as he became a back-to-back world medalist as he came in with a bronze medal for the second straight World Championships. First off, Pat, was that your first trip to Budapest, and how was the trip overall?
Yeah, it was a very successful business trip. We'll say that. Fortunate enough to go out there with some guys who had graduated from NC State, so we made that a fun trip going out to support Nick. It was great. Budapest was a great city. There was great wrestling, great food. I really enjoyed my time there. It was it's always nice to be back, but there was a lot of traveling for a short period of time and great wrestling too. So overall, it was an A+ trip and got to regroup, get ready for this season.
And you've obviously known Nick for quite some time, but your role with his career has changed some. You're still involved coaching-wise, but you can also now sit back a bit and watch his matches from afar. But as a former coach, how is it to sit up in the stands and watch him compete versus previously being Matt's side and be able to talk to him during matches?
Yeah, it's a different role, and it's working well. Obviously, Obi's day-to-day in the room and has the time and the focus that those guys need. You know, being involved in the college scene and a lot of the administrative stuff, it's hard to be the day-to-day with those guys, so we felt it's best to go that route, and Obi's phenomenal technician, and, it's proven his system works. He's producing guys at the highest level here at NC State in the off-season, and bringing back 2 world medals the last 2 years, I think speaks volume for both Nick and Obi, the way that they're going about things. But yeah, it's still challenging. You know, you want to go to a wrestling event because it's nice to sit there and not stress or worry about the outcome. But that's not the case, when Nick's competing, because there's a lot of commitment on his part. A lot of people have invested into making sure that he gets everything he needs to be successful. So it's like being there and watching and wrestling the match itself up in the stands. People probably look at you like, what the heck's this guy doing? Why does he care so much?
Are you a yeller or you sit there silent?
It depends on what's going on.
Check your phone for tweets?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
We're moving, basically wrestling the match with him. A little slower probably, but sitting there, it is. It's fun to watch, but at times, how much these guys, how much time and commitment they pour into it. So you want nothing but the best and see these guys succeed because, Nick has committed to being one of the best guys in the world, and he trains like it, and he deserves to win because he's a great person. So you want to see him succeed. And when they don't, you feel for him, any letdown they have, I think as a coach, you're going to feel that too.
And for us who have not been to a big international tournament like the World Championships, I'm still waiting for Nick to get me on that pass list. How are these international tournaments to attend?
I think this one was, went out to the one 2 years ago in Paris, and this one I think was way more followed by the local people that came in. There was probably over 10,000 people there for those last day of competition, and it was an awesome atmosphere. It was a perfect arena because there wasn't a bad seat in there. I thought they did a phenomenal job making it entertaining, and the wrestling obviously is top notch. So it was great. I think they did a really good job, and they had some, big screens as well where you could see the reviews and watch up top if you couldn't see the action up close. So it was great. It was just a perfect venue for the World Championships.
Friend of the podcast, Jason Bryant, how was he as the PA announcer?
He did a phenomenal job. I am impressed at how he can pronounce some of these people's names, because I'm telling you, you gotta be good at announcing, and he does. He's one of the best in the business, and there's a reason why he's at the World Championships. If you're working at the Worlds, you got to be good at what you're doing, and there's no doubt he is.
Little free publicity. Maybe he'll give us a discount next time he edits this podcast.
Yeah, that's worth 10% right there.
So, Nick came home with a third-place finish, and I have to admit, I enjoyed seeing pics of him and Bill from their post-tournament adventures in Europe. Did you see some of those?
I saw a lot of those. Bill, I think, had about 4 burgers. I think he ate a burger every day, and, Nick's not shy to eat some of that good food. But those guys are on a burger diet right now.
But this was a non-Olympic cycle. So what's next for Nick over the upcoming months, as his main goal is to continue to work towards the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take away. At the end of the day, watching from far and seeing things, it makes us all know. And we talked a little bit about as a staff that Nick's right there ready to make that jump to be the guy. And it's perfect timing coming together. These tournaments that he's wrestling, and he's learning a lot. He's continuing to improve, and he knows, the matches that maybe he didn't win, there's little costly mistakes that he can fix. So it's not like he's, getting beat because somebody's just that much better than him. It's mistakes that he's making, and that's what makes him good. Is he comes back, he figures things out, and he'll keep fine-tuning. And, at the end of the day, the goal is to go to the Olympics and win a gold, and this is part of the process to continue to get better. And he's motivated and hungry, and he's got a great training situation here and a lot of support. So we're looking forward to seeing him continue to succeed.
And back stateside and back to the 2018-19 NC State wrestling team. First off, some exciting schedule notes that have come out this past week that I'd like you to touch on. First, the duel at Ohio State on January 6th will be broadcast live on ESPN2. Great exposure for your program, and still working on some details, including ticket information, but the home duel versus Brown will be held at the PNC Arena on January 12th, right after the men's basketball game versus Pitt. That's sure to be a great venue. We want it packed, but just touch on these 2 recent additions to your schedule.
Yeah, when we were working on the scheduling for Ohio State, there was a chance that we knew that could happen. So that's why the timing of it was a little later and not an earlier duel. And I was willing to, work with them, because at the end of the day, if we can get wrestling out there on some bigger channels and networks, I think it's good for the sport, and that's something we're willing to do. And yeah, it's going to be great having that on ESPN2 is great exposure for wrestling and our program. So we're looking forward to that. Also talked a little bit, got a call from Baldwin. He might be the commentator on that as well. So hoping we can get that worked out and have him on there, because I think he's good for college wrestling.
And PNC duel, a new venue, something a little bit different you guys haven't done before.
Yeah, that was a little bit of brainstorming with facilities. You got a lot of seasons happening right now with different sports. We're in the middle of it. So finding a venue that works for, all teams involved sometimes was difficult. And it just so happened that the PNC was an option, and we want to do something different. We want to continue to grow wrestling here in Raleigh, and that's a great opportunity to have people stick around after a basketball game. And we're going to need support from people that might not typically come to a wrestling match to fill those stands, because we have that arena, and we can make some noise. And ultimately the goal is at some point to try to get an NCAA tournament here in Raleigh or Charlotte in the state of North Carolina. So this will be a first time going in that venue, and maybe we can show people that, hey, this is legit, and we can work with this.
And we'll have a lot more details on that duel at PNC as it gets closer, obviously ticket information. But your season actually gets underway this weekend, as NC State will be in action Saturday and Sunday. So just a bevy of action here. And for those that are going to be in Raleigh this weekend, you can come by and watch the Pack in action as well. On Saturday, prior to the NC State-Florida State football game, the wrestling team will be holding its annual open practice and wrestle-offs. The action will start at 12:45 at the Close King Indoor Practice Facility, which is right next to the Murphy Center. Pat, a lot of people came out last year for this event, so we're hoping for a big crowd this year too. What can the fans expect to see on Saturday?
It's a great event that we've started to host, and hopefully we can continue to do it every year. But to piggyback off a home football duel, our game for putting in a dual meet kind of atmosphere for our team, I think it's a win-win. You know, we want to try and get more fans to understand what wrestling's about, and, you know, chance for these people to meet our guys and see wrestling firsthand up close. And it's, you know, sometimes these wrestle-offs can be a little tedious because these guys know each other, and we try to do the best we can to mix and match, get guys matches. At the end of the day, this is probably one to get our guys prepared for competition, but also, you know, hopefully get some NC State fans a first glimpse of what's to come for the season. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is work our way into the season to figure out who's going to be our starter. But this is just kind of get these guys a match under their belt so we can get ready for the season.
Swing by Saturday. You can be the first to pick up the official 2018-19 NC State Wrestling team poster. They'll be given away for free. We'll also have the ticket office there on site and selling tickets to the upcoming season. We've already set a new record for season ticket sales, but want to continue to pack Reynolds for every duel this upcoming season. You can also purchase tickets online now at gopack.com/buy tickets. But Pat, right after the wrestle-offs, you're going to have a large contingent travel up to Roanoke for the Hokie Open on Sunday. Probably too many guys to name individually, but who do you anticipate being in action, many in their first collegiate tournament?
Basically, all our freshmen will be up there kicking off the year, so these guys can get some mat time. They do a freshman-sophomore division, which a lot of our true freshmen will wrestle in, just to kind of get their first experience of college wrestling, because it's different. There's riding time, the stalling's different, the out-of-bounds is a little different. So we'll ease our way in. We'll see plenty of tough competition, and there's going to be a lot of good young talent there. And a couple of our older guys, more experienced guys, will be up there as well. We're going to probably take 6 rostered guys that aren't redshirting, Hayden being one of them. 41, get us a good idea who could be the guy there. So we'll put them in some outside competition. I think some 25-pounders might go as well. So we'll get a good mixture of our lineup, just trying to see who's who, and going to step up and show us, you know, who wants to start this year in some of these weights. But Hayden's going to miss a couple competitions because he's going to UW23. So this was a way for him to pick up, you know, hopefully 4 matches, depending on how many are in his bracket. But that'll give him a chance to get his feet wet with the college season and switch right back to freestyle and then back to college. So he'll be ready for all styles.
How excited are your freshmen to go up there and actually compete, not against themselves, but against other schools?
Yeah, they are. And we've been training basically all summer and the fall. So they're itching to get out there and show how much they've improved. And they've been working extremely hard, and we have some very good young talent right now. So I'm looking forward to watching those guys compete in these tournaments, and a couple of them have high expectations right away. So it'll be fun to watch these guys go out there and let loose.
And this week on GoPack.com, we pushed out a complete season preview talking about each guy and where they stand. So if you have not done so, please go to GoPack and check out the season preview. And in addition, we'll continue to push out new episodes of the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast, now sporting a great new updated logo. Please subscribe wherever you listen to all your favorite podcasts. Pat, while you were gone off in Europe, I stayed back and was busy securing our featured guest for the interview segment on this episode of the podcast. It's a bit of a longer interview than normal, so many great stories were shared, but I was able to get WWE Hall of Famer Sergeant Slaughter on the phone, and we covered his whole career and what he's up to now. But it was interesting. At the end of the interview, he went on and on about the impressive job NC State Wrestling has done. He lives in North Carolina now, so he's one of our followers. But he had so many great thoughts and admiration for Michael Macchiavello winning that NCAA title. Pat, I know I'm a huge WWE fan, so this podcast, that was a perfect guest. But how great is it for you to know that so many people are watching this program and have such a vested interest in what you guys are doing?
It's great to have. You know, we want to continue to grow our fan base, and obviously people that are connected and fans of wrestling on all aspects, I think is only going to benefit our sport. And yes, NC State Wrestling as we grow our product, you know, at the national level. So it's great to have these guys behind it and supporting it. You know, I think, like you said, I grew up watching him compete and enjoyed his whole career all the way through. And yeah, I get a lot of questions thrown at me about why are we so connected to WWE and
personal platform for myself.
I guess so. Nick's always asking what's up with this, and I got to tell him, Brian's a fan of WWE, so we got to support it. And it's it's a good mixture of both. People obviously follow that side of things, and then college wrestling and MMA, they kind of mix and match a little bit. So it's good to have that and learn the entertaining side of things and keep implementing some new stuff with our sport. So it's exciting, and I'm glad we're getting that kind of national support now.
You talk about a killer podcast. We've had MMA world champions,
yes,
pro wrestling world champions,
absolutely,
NCAA champions. The list just goes on and on.
Don't forget the in-house people too. Those are the most important.
The Hidden Heroes segment.
Yes,
people
that's
people
critical.
love the Hidden Heroes segment.
Of course.
Thank you to our anonymous donor.
Yeah.
But Pat, good luck this weekend. I know it will be busy for you, but the start of every season has got to be your favorite time of the year.
Yeah, I think we get caught up in the nonstop of recruiting, just things happening on campus, off campus, traveling. And when the season starts, it puts us on a routine and more of a schedule. So people actually think we're busier during the season. And I think we're not. We're more focused in on the guys that are on our team. So that's what I like most about it, is we can really zone in on the guys that are here and less on the road for non-competition type events. So that's what I like best about it. And it's exciting to see these guys have the opportunity to go out, compete, and showcase all their hard work.
And very selfishly, I like it when you're on a schedule because you'll answer me back, and I know when we
always answer. You always want to text, and I say, pick up the phone and call me.
You're a busy man.
It's like Nick. I text Nick today a couple times. He responds. I call him. He doesn't pick up, and it's just like, all right, I see where we're at. You're just like that.
That's why we get along so great. But stay tuned to our interview with former WWE World Champion Sergeant Slaughter. We are very proud and honored to have WWE Hall of Famer Sergeant Slaughter join us on this episode of the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast. Sarge, it's great to finally catch up, and thanks for chatting with us.
10 hut. All right, Eddie's maggot.
Kid
you can
growing.
Get up now. You don't have to do any more push-ups.
See, you keep going on and on. I wasn't even ready. I thought, it's just casual conversation, but I see you're ready to roll.
Oh, I'm ready. I was born ready.
Now, I should note that this is not our first interview with the WWE Hall of Famer, as back in November, we ran into Jerry Briscoe out in Reno during a tournament. And just like our head coach, Pat Popolizio, Jerry is a former Oklahoma State wrestler. But Jerry helped us set up this interview. And Sarge, I know you've known Jerry Briscoe for many years, and both of you have been on TV and in behind-the-scenes roles in the WWE. Can you tell us a little about your relationship with Jerry, who's one of our supporters and friends of the program here at NC State?
Well, I first met his brother, Jack Briscoe, when I first entered into professional wrestling out in Vancouver, Canada. And I came into the arena for my first match of my time there in my apprenticeship. And I got there, a couple hours early, not knowing what is going to take place. When I walked in the locker room, there was just one gentleman sitting on a bench reading a book, and I walked over and I recognized it was Jack Briscoe. So I stood up, or he stood up to greet me, and he said, "I'm Jack Briscoe, NWA World Champion." And I went to shake his hand, and I went to say my name, and he says, "I know who you are." I said, "You know who I am?" He goes, "Yeah, anybody that had a shoot with Billy Robinson and beat him, I have to know who they are." So that's how I kind of got into talking with Jack Briscoe, and he asked me if I was going to be there during the week, and I said yes. And he said, "Do you mind if I travel with you?" And I said, "Not at all. It'd be an honor." And I said, "If you don't mind a pickup truck." And he said, "That's even better, as long as you got some country music on it." So he gave me a lot of good advice on that week that we traveled together. And later on, as I progressed into professional wrestling world, I ran up to Jack and Jerry, as they were the tag team duel here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he and his brother were, Jack wasn't the champion at that time anymore. And I started to get to know Gerald, and Gerald was more of the spokesperson for the team, did most of the promos, but got to know Gerald very well, and they're both great gentlemen, great wrestlers, great amateur wrestlers, great professional wrestlers, and just all around great guys.
And you've won so many titles as a professional wrestler and created one of the most well-known characters ever, but kind of want to go back to the beginning. You were born in Michigan, grew up in Minnesota. While in high school, you played both football and wrestling. Tell us a little bit about your amateur wrestling career.
Well, I was actually born in Beaufort, South Carolina. My father was a Marine at Parris Island, and we grew up in Minnesota. I don't know where the Michigan came in, but I see it on my website.
Wikipedia lies.
Yeah. Never believe what you read, I guess. But, I grew up in Minnesota and just had a love for professional wrestling. And since I'm as old as I can remember, watched professional wrestling with my father, and he was really, really into it. And I first found out about it. My family and we lived on a farm, and we only had like 2 bedrooms, and my sister and I they would put us to sleep on a fold-out couch, or put us to sleep in their bed, and then when we went to sleep, they put us on the fold-out couch, and we'd wake up there. But one night I was woken by a bunch of screaming and hollering. I was a little bit startled, so I snuck out of the bedroom and walked into the living room, and there my father was watching professional wrestling with a bunch of his friends and my uncles, and they were yelling at the TV about what was going on, and I really, started seeing the entertainment value of it. And so for a few weeks, it was always on a Saturday night. So for a few weeks, I would just kind of pretend I was sleeping, and I would sneak out and watch it behind their chairs. Finally, they found me, caught me, and told me to go ahead and join them. So that was my first love of getting into professional wrestling. And so, of course, I always watched it. And when I finally got jump ahead, we got into high school. We didn't have a professional or amateur wrestling program. So my father and some of his friends and a couple uncles and some other fathers would go up to the schools on Saturday and get out some mats and try to teach us what they were, what they read up in books about amateur wrestling and how to be amateur wrestlers. And of course, a few of us weren't too into it because we wanted to do body slams and drop kicks and come off the top rope or things like that. And they said, no, there's no ropes in amateur wrestling, and you're all in there one-on-one. And so that's kind of where I put my foot into amateur wrestling. But my real love was football. And so although I was a pretty good wrestler, I didn't, concentrated on it as much as I should have. And one day at physical education, we had a wrestling program, and we had a kind of a playoff, and I ended up winning. I was the champion of our Phi-Ed class. And so later on that afternoon, while I was sitting in the history class, there was a knock at the door, and the teacher went to the door, and then she turned to me and said, he wants to talk to you. And so everybody said, I wonder what he did. So I got outside of the classroom, and there was a gentleman standing there. He said, I'm Larry Clevin. And I said, yes, Larry, I know who you are. He said, well, I'm the new wrestling coach here. And Harlan Neapol Leopold and I are going to start a amateur wrestling program for our school. And I said, oh, great. He said, well, I see, and I heard that you beat everybody in the wrestling class today. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I need you to be my heavyweight. And I said, well, I don't know a whole lot about wrestling. He said, I'll teach you. So that's how I got into amateur wrestling in high school and competed when I was able to. And as I say, I lived on a farm, so farm work sometimes came before sports. So I had to get the things done around the farm before I could really enjoy the other parts of my high school activities.
Any aspirations to go to college to wrestle at all?
Well, I thought I would probably get some type of a scholarship through football and possibly do some wrestling along with it. But our school was so small that they really didn't throw out a lot of scholarships our way. And I was a pretty good football player. I was most valuable player of my high school football team, my junior and senior year, and I was a lineman. So that's pretty unusual, and I don't know if it's ever been duplicated. But I was led more to go into the football than I was the wrestling. And I did play a little basketball, and wrestling and basketball sometimes were on the same night and in different schools. So it was tough to make a decision, and we had a couple other heavyweights, so I didn't want to leave the team without a representative of the heavyweight division. But there were times in high school, I was probably around 200 pounds, and the weight class was anything that was called heavyweight was from 175 and beyond. So I wrestled some guys that are around 400 pounds, and so I learned in a hurry to do some leg diving and get them on their back and get on them as fast as I could.
And you joined the U.S. Marines and served as a drill instructor down in South Carolina. And for as legendary as Sergeant Slaughter still is to professional wrestling, it actually took 6 years into your career for you to incorporate your status as a U.S. Marine when you debuted with the WWE in 1980. How did the decision come about for you to become Sergeant Slaughter?
Well, I was, as you said, I was in the Marines. I opted to enlist because of the scholarships just weren't coming, and my parents were farmers. They didn't put money away for colleges and things like that. So my father thought, well, maybe that'd be the way for me to go, that when I got out of the Marines, I should possibly go to college if I wanted to do that. And so one time I was on I was on a maneuver and got back to the barracks pretty early in the morning, and my junior DI came in, and he said, Sarge, have you ever seen, I forget the name of the movie, but Jackie Gleason and Steve McQueen were in it. And it was an old black and white movie. And Jackie Gleason's character, his name was Sergeant Slaughter. And he said, he reminded me of you, and I'm going to start calling you Sergeant Slaughter. I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that around here, you know. And he said, oh, I'm just kidding you. So, but anytime we would get together, you know, after we would get off base and have some Sunday afternoons and barbecues and get-togethers, he'd always call me Sergeant Slaughter. And so when I was home one time on a leave, a friend of mine was a sports writer, and he's going to do a story on a pro wrestling training camp. Wanted to know if I wanted to go along and watch it. I said, sure, I'll go. So when I got to this old barn out in kind of near where I lived, I walked in, and there was these guys in the ring, you know, going through the exercises, and two of the professional wrestlers that were training them I had watched on television since, you know, I was a pretty young kid, Vern Gagne and Billy Robinson. And so as I was watching it, I noticed that most of the guys that were training were guys I wrestled in high school, and I beat them all, and I started giving it some thought. If these guys can do this, maybe I should think about it. And as I was in deep thought, I heard, we need a volunteer to get in the ring. And of course, I looked around, and being a DI in the Marine Corps, I knew what that word meant. Volunteer meant you were in trouble. So I got into the ring begrudgingly, and they put holes on me, and Vern Gagne put some holes on me and had me tapping out and screaming Uncle Sam. And so finally I went to slide out of the ring, and he said, where are you going? I said, well, I don't see any reason to stay in here. He said, oh, it's too tough for you? I said, no, I'm not too tough. It's not too tough. I just let you put these holes on me and, not giving me much of a chance. He says, oh, really? Is that right? You think you could do any better? I said, well, I probably could do better than just let you put the hole on me. So he says, well, get down on all fours, see what you got. So as I got down on all fours, I heard the name Rick. Hey, Rick, you get on him first. And I heard Rick yell out, I got a bad shoulder, coach. And, of course, Rick he said, don't give me that, get on him. And Rick, of course, was Ric Flair, who is Ric Flair of today. And so they said wrestle, and I pinned Rick, which wasn't too popular. A guy coming off the street pinning one of these. They were already in 8 weeks of training, and so Vern Gagne got a little upset and told me to get down all fours again. And told Ken Patera, hey Ken, you get on him. And I don't know if anybody remembers, Ken Patera was a weightlifting champion in the Olympics. So I escaped from Ken, and then it got a little bit more violent. Vern walked over to Billy Robinson and kind of whispered something to him, and he said, yep. And so Vern said, well, get down on all fours. We'll see what you can do against a professional wrestler. So as I went down on all fours, Billy decided he wanted to have some fun, and he dropped his shin against the back of my ankle and tried to break my foot or my leg for me. So I came up fighting, and there was no more rules. As they say, the mud, the blood, and the beer. And we went at it pretty hot and heavy. I got him down, and I got him in the wizard and a couple other different maneuvers. And he didn't actually tap. He crawled to the rope, and Vern made me break the hold on him. And of course, when I got up, I was bleeding and he was bleeding, and we had saliva out of our mouths, and so Vern said, no, you just go on out and I'll come back out and talk to you. So I go outside the barn with my friend, and it's huffing and puffing pretty good. And here come Vern Gagne, and he said, man, kid, where'd you learn to fight like that? In high school? Were you a high school wrestler? I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, where else did you learn to fight like that? And I said, well, I'm in the Marine Corps. And he goes, the Marine Corps? I was in the Marine Corps. And I said, Semper Fi, hoorah. And we kind of hugged each other. And he asked me what my name was. And my real name is Bob Remus. And so I said, my name's Bob Remus. And he said, Bob Remus, is your father Rudy Remus? I said, yes. He said, damn, he put the roof on my house. And my father used to have a roofing company on the side when he was on the farm to make extra money. I said, yeah, I know he did. And we're big fans of yours. He says, well, damn. He said, you ever think about being a professional wrestler? I said, well, I'm in the Corps right now. And he said, well, if you ever decide you want to try it, give me a call. Here's my phone number. I can't let you start with these guys, of course. I said, well, I couldn't anyway. I'm still in the Corps. And he said, but you look like you got some possibilities. So as soon as I got in my car and went back home, and I knew I wanted to be a professional wrestler. So I told my dad about it, and he said, yeah, you should go for it. I don't want you to have to do what I'm doing. And if you don't want to be in the Marines anymore, just, you make that decision. So I made the decision not to do that. So long story short, I went to the training camp. And we had about 68 wrestlers that started, or I should say trainees that started, and 3 of us made it through. One of them being Chris Taylor, who was a heavyweight for Iowa State, and another wrestler by the name of Paul Pershman, who was Buddy Rose, professional name. And so as we graduated from our training camp, we were asked if we wanted to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, or we could go to Vancouver, Canada. So I did some research, finding out who's wrestling in Charlotte, North Carolina, and who was going to be in Vancouver, Canada. And I didn't notice a lot of names, big names in Vancouver, so I said, maybe I should go that direction. And I started thinking of a name, well, Bob Remus doesn't really, sound like a professional wrestling name. So I decided I wanted to follow the footsteps of superstar Billy Graham, who was, he wore tie-dye and had long blonde hair and the big muscles and everything. And so I decided I was going to be beautiful Bobby Remus. And had my sister, who was a beautician, she dyed my hair. I started growing it out and went out to Vancouver, Canada, and went as beautiful Bobby. And one night I was wrestling another wrestler from Minnesota by the name of Buck Ramstead. And Buck was a pretty good hand. And Vern Gagne always taught us that when we got to the ring, we should put our backs to our opponents and stand in the corner toward the ring post and the turnbuckle. And when our name was announced, turn around and throw your hand up in the air and get a response. So as I was standing there waiting for my name to be announced, I heard people laughing. And I turned around to look, and here Buck Ramstead was blowing kisses at me. So I said, oh, no. That's not the image, the character that I want to be portrayed as, And so I ended up beating poor Bob half to death that night as a revenge, and got home that night to my wife, and I said, I think I'm going to get rid of the beautiful Bobby. She said, why? What happened? And I told her, and she said, oh, no, you don't want that. I said, no, I sure don't. So a few days later, I went to the barber, got all my hair cut off, and went as Bruiser Bob. And shortly after that, I went down to Portland, Oregon, where I continued to wrestle as Bruiser Bob, and got a chance to go out to New Orleans, and they told me they wanted a big, tough, rugged type of wrestler. So I got to thinking Slaughter, Bob Slaughter. That's kind of a catchy name. So I went to start using Bob Slaughter, and unfortunately my mother got sick, got cancer, so I had to cancel all of my wrestling career, and I went back home to help my father on the farm and with his roofing company, and I was helping him one day. It started to rain, and I had a real tough time, Brian, with the camera. When that red light would come on, I would just like freeze. I was just real uneasy with that camera, and just was difficult for me to do anything, and do it the way I wanted to do it. So while we were out going to do a roofing job one morning, it started to rain, and the heavens opened up and it rained really, really bad. So we all decided we'd go home. So when I got home, I turned on the TV, And just as I turned the TV on, I heard the United States Marine Corps hymn. And da 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 da, and there on the TV in black and white was the beginning of a movie called The DI with Jack Webb. So I sat down and I watched it, and Jack Webb was the most brutal drill sergeant, even tougher than I was, and he went through this barracks, cleaned out the barracks, and never used one word of profanity. And that's pretty tough to do. So I started watching it, and I went, that'd be a hell of a character for professional wrestling. And so I ran downstairs. I watched the end of the movie, ran downstairs, opened my locker box, got out my campaign cover and my whistle and my swagger stick, and ran upstairs and got some sunglasses and looked in the mirror and started getting a growly voice and started doing some promos like I just watched Jack Webb do. And when my wife got home from work, I said, take some pictures of me. So she got the Polaroid, this is going back a ways, Polaroid camera. I took some pictures of me, and she said, that really looks pretty good. I said, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. So I went down to the next day. It rained again, so we didn't work. And so I went down to Vern Gagne's office. I was back in Minnesota now, and went up to his office, and he wasn't there. But his partner, Wally Carver, was there. He said, well, what's going on with you? How's your mother doing? I said, oh, she's doing fine. He said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I got this new character that I thought I'd throw by Vern and see what he thinks. And he says, oh, I don't know. What is it? So I started showing him and telling him, and he watched it, and he kind of shook his head, and he said, well, tell you the truth, Bob, there have been a few G.I. Joes and a couple other Army guys here and there, and private this and private that, and none of them really, did well. I said, oh, I guess, okay. So I went to leave, kind of dejected, and as I got to the elevator, and the elevator opened, there's Vern Gagne. So he said, hey, Bob, what's going on? Oh, just had this character I was going to run by you. And he said, what is it? I said, well, I'd have to actually show it to you. So I go into his office, and I take everything out of my bags, and I put it on, and I come out, and I start doing what I thought was a good Sergeant Slaughter impression. And he jumped up behind his desk and started doing it for me because he hated his drill instructor. He mimicked his drill instructor, and he said, that's great. I love that idea. I love that character. When can you start? And I said, well, I can't start. I'm still working with my dad and taking care of my mom. And so he said, well, when you get ready, I won't start you here, but I'll send you down to Kansas City. So the time came that my mother was okay to have me go away for a while. So I went down to Kansas City, and that's when I started Sergeant Slaughter in 1975. And I started doing the first promo I did, and Harley Race, who had just lost the NWA championship, he owned part of the territory there, and he just fell in love with me. And he took me aside and said, kid, that's a hell of a character you got there. I think we're going to do some business. So that's how the Sarge got started. And as I was continuing to do the Sarge, my mother got a little more sick, so I had to pack up my bags and go back home again. And so I was out of wrestling for probably a year and a half. And one day Vern Gagne called and said, can you go to Hawaii? I said, sure, I'll go to Hawaii. Let me see if it's okay, And so my mother said, yeah, go. You never get a chance to go to Hawaii. So I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks, but they wanted me to wear a mask and go as the executioner. And so I did that. And when I got back from Hawaii, Vern Gagne came up to me at a an event, and he said, "I understand you're a pretty good mask man." And I said, "Well, I never did it before, but it was kind of fun." He said, "Well, I don't like the guy that's in our area right now. His name was Super Destroyer. Don Jardine was his name." And he said, I'd like to get rid of him and have you take his bookings." I said, "Well, I really don't think I can. I've got to, get the farm, in order and go off to the roofing company." And he said, "Well, if I can get you home every night, would you consider it?" And I said, yeah, I would consider it. So I talked it over with my dad, and he said, "Yeah, go for it." So for the next 3 years, I went as Super Destroyer Mark II under a mask, and had a opportunity. I'm kind of going through this a little quick on you, but I finally was getting to where we were going to quit being the Super Destroyer Mark II, and a friend of mine was going to New York for a tryout to work for Vince McMahon's father, who owned the company at that time. And I told him, "Well, when you go out there, would you mind taking these photos?" And I gave him photos of Sergeant Slaughter. He said, "Sergeant Slaughter? I never knew that you were Sergeant Slaughter." I said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "Yeah, I'll be glad to." So about a week later, I get a call from Vince McMahon, and he said, "I've got your photos in front of me. I like the idea. Why don't you come out?" So I booked a trip out to New York. Actually, it was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and sat there. At that time, they would do 3 tapings of wrestling shows, and then they'd have a couple what they call dark matches to keep the people there that were really good talents against each other. And so Vince's father came to me and said, "I want to see your character do a promo with my son, who's my boss today, Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon." And he said, "I'd like you to go out and do a promo. I want to hear what your promos sound like." I said, "Okay." So, the people have seen everything pretty much in professional in the matches that night. And so finally I got dressed, and he said, "Is there anything I can do to help you get this thing going?" And I said, "Well," I went back to my bag and I got a cassette tape. And I said, would you be able to play this?" And he said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "Well, normally I put it onto, I would put it on a tape box and put the microphone on it. But if you have a way to put it over the loudspeaker system here, it'd be great." He said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "It's the Marine Corps hymn." And he said, "The Marine Corps hymn?" I said, "Yeah, I want you to play it before I go out." And he goes, never thought about having music before. So he started thinking about it. And so he left and he came back. He says, "Okay, I got it all queued up. When you're ready, they're going to start that music and you can go out." So it was my turn. And all of a sudden the Marine Corps hymn started playing, and I went to walk out of the dressing room, and he stopped me, put his arm across my path, and I could see him listening. He was listening to see the reaction of the fans that were there, because there had never been music before for an entrance. And so he finally said, "Okay, go." So I had, my swagger stick and a cigar and the sunglasses and my campaign cover. And I started, as soon as I got out the door, I started yelling at the fans and calling them maggots and pukes and slimes and scums, and stand up and salute your drill sergeant. And by the time I got to Vince, who was doing the promo, they were coming over the railing. Here's this guy coming out and insulting them, and that they weren't taking too kindly of it. So as I got to Vince, I'd never met him before. This is my first time to meet him, and he's a pretty good sized guy, but I kind of towered him a little bit. And so as soon as he wanted to ask me the question, I said, "Shut your hole, puke. Who gave you permission to speak?" And it startled him. And so I started rattling him and went up and down his chest and his belly. And I said, "Put your belly and stick that chest out." and gave him the old Sergeant Slaughter routine, and he's kind of getting a little flustered. And I'd heard through the grapevine that he when he got his haircut, it cost $200. And I said, that's a hell of a lot of money to pay for a haircut. So I took my swagger stick and I went up and down his hair, and I said, who cut your hair, Ray Charles? And so he got more flustered. And so I did the promo, and people were screaming and hollering at me and causing quite a ruckus there. And so the last thing I did is I took a big puff of my cigar and I blew it in Vince's face. Well, I didn't know at that time, I know now, and everybody in the world knows, but you don't blow smoke in Vince McMahon's face. You don't even have a cigarette a mile from him. And so he turned red, then he started to turn purple, and he looked like he was going to come after me. So I walked back to the dressing room, and I got in and I sat down, and I saw a few of the other wrestlers that were still there kind of laughing and giggling like, well, he lost his job before he even started, and so Vince's father had 4 quarters that he would jingle in his hands, and I heard those 4 quarters coming my direction, and he walked around my chair as I was taking my combat boots off, unlacing them, and finally I got one just about all unlaced, and I looked up at him, and he's standing in front of me, and he gives me the follow me sign, and I look over at the other wrestlers, and they're all kind of like, uh-oh, he's getting it. So we went into this little kind of a closet size room, and he walks around me some more, and finally he stops in front of me, stops jingling the quarters, looks right in my face, and he said, that's the greatest character I've ever seen in professional wrestling. Sergeant Slaughter. Oh my God. Even my son hates you. He said, I got to have you start right away. And I said, well, I can't right away. I'm working in Minnesota for Vern Gagne. He said, oh, I'll talk to Gags. Don't worry about it. We'll get you here. And so that's how I got into the WWE, WWF at that time. When I was there, it was WWWF. And then it went to WWF when Vince's son took over. And that's kind of a long but short version of how I got into New York as Sergeant Slaughter.
You're talking about that hatred, but when you had your run in the 90s, probably the most controversial moment of your career is that Sarge, he became an Iraqi sympathizer, and that was during the Gulf War. You were teaming with the Iron Sheik. You want fans to boo you, but I'm sure you took it to a whole new level. So how much did those fans boo you, and any interesting stories of trouble that it caused?
Well, before my first run there in the WWE when I started in 1979, of course I was the villain, and then I left. Had a lot of matches with Bob Backlund, who was the champion at that time, and Andre the Giant, and quite a few of the big stars, all the big stars there, Bruno Sammartino and Pedro Morales, and so it was time for me to go. Vince didn't like keep wrestlers too long because he didn't want people to get too much of them. So they told me I had to leave. So I went down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I started wrestling there. And as we got through there, and I made my second trip up to New York City, I went out with the McMahons and a couple other producers, and we were sitting at a bar having a drink, and Vince's father was still running the company, and he said, Sarge, it's so good to have you back. There's no better villain in the world than Sergeant Slaughter. I'm just so happy you're back. And kept praising me and patting me on the back, and I said, well, Mr. McMahon, if you think Sergeant Slaughter is a great villain, you ought to see him as a hero. And he just stopped and looked at me, and he said, hero? What do you mean a hero? I said, well, you've got the Iran situation where Ayatollah Khomeini took over. He had the Black Hawks down. We had the hostage situation. We had the murder of the Marines at the embassy, along with everything else. And I said, we never really got to punch Ayatollah in the nose. And I said, right now you've got the Iron Sheik here who's from Iran. And I said, wouldn't it be a great thing for wrestling and for the world, for the United States Marine Corps to come after Iran, and after the Iron Sheik? And he goes, oh, no. And he said, you could never be a hero. That would really not work. And so I looked over his shoulder, and Vince, my boss of today, Mr. McMahon, he's getting ready to take over his father's business, and he's shaking his head, yes, I like that idea. So he reaches over to me and whispers in my ear. He goes, don't worry about Pops. I'll take care of him. But I love that idea. So I started doing TVs again in New York as a villain. And one night in Allentown, Pennsylvania, we were doing our television tapings. And Vince came into the locker room, and he said, are you ready? And I said, ready for what? And he said, ready to be, the hero. And I said, are you sure you really want to do it? He goes, yeah. So I had like 5 minutes to figure out what was going on. He said, I'm going to send the Sheik out with Ayatollah Blassie. That's what they called him. Fred Blassie was his manager. He said, I'm going to send him out to the ring to wrestle a nobody so that he gets a real good victory. And then I'm going to have him do a promo anti-USA. And he said, when the time's right, I'm going to hit your music. And you come out there and you do what you got to do. I'm not going to tell you what to say. Just give me your best General Patton promo. So back then, Brian, we didn't have scripts. We didn't have, anybody telling us what to say. We created our own characters. Everything was pretty ad lib. And he wanted to get that reaction from the Iron Sheik and Fred Blassie, not knowing that this is happening, and catch it all on camera. So he's Iron Sheik goes out and beats up his opponent pretty badly, and starts doing a promo. And so all of a sudden they played the Marine Corps hymn, and here I come, and the place kind of got real quiet, and all of a sudden you heard the momentum. Yeah. And so I came out of the dressing room and playing the Marine Corps hymn and blew my whistle and pointed at the Iron Sheik. I said, if you want somebody to beat up, I'm the guy right here. So he got out of the ring, and we passed each other in the aisleway, and they kind of broke us apart. And I went in to see how his opponent was doing. And when we got his opponent out of the ring, I grabbed the microphone and I started doing what I thought was a General Patton type promo. And I ended it with, when I was a boy in school, and when I was in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and in the Marine Corps, the one thing we always said and we believed in, and I'm going to say it right now, and I started doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And when I started about the 10th word, everybody stood on their feet, on their chairs, got lighters out, were saying it with me, and I mean, the place went crazy. And so I got back, and the Vince McMahon came running in and gave me a hug. He said, unbelievable. We're on our way. And so I had to wrestle the match after that. So I went back out, and at one time they would call me Gomer. That was the name I tried to get the people to call me, and so we could get the audience into the matches. So all of a sudden they took the Gomer signs and they started putting on Slaughter for President, USA, and so we're off to the races, and so everything was going hot and heavy, and I was getting bags and bags of mail, and went to a book signing I went to a book store for an autograph signing, and we got about 2 blocks from the bookstore, and the guy that was with me, he said, I got to go see what the problem is. We're late, and there's a big traffic jam here. So he jumps out and runs and gone for about 10 minutes. He comes back and he's like white as a ghost. He says, Sarge, they're all here to see you. He says, there's thousands of them. There's thousands of people. It was in Boston, Massachusetts. And I said, oh, so he said, we got to go. We'll never get there in the cars. We got to walk. So we walk, and of course people start seeing us and being trained in guerrilla warfare and things like that. The first thing I'm looking at is up. I look up to see what's out there, and there's people hanging off the buildings. They're everywhere, and there was no line. I got into this place. They couldn't even get me inside. They just put a table outside, and it looked like a circle, an incredible mass of people. And we just started signing autographs. It took me about 8 hours, almost 7.5 hours to get all the autographs done. They were holding up flashlights for me to be able to sign people's autographs. And so that sparked something into Hasbro Toys, G.I. Joe. So they get a hold of a friend of mine who knows my attorney, or a friend of theirs who knew my attorney, and they start calling each other, and we have this new idea. We want to put a real life character in G.I. Joe, and why don't you have a meeting? So I said, oh yeah, let's do it. So I had a camouflage limousine at that time, and got my private Trinodal to drive us up to Pawtucket, Rhode Island, put the flags on the fenders, and when we got to Pawtucket's headquarters of Hasbro Toys, I said, drive around the block a few times. So he did. I said, go real slow. So pretty soon people are seeing this camouflage limo with flags on the front, and we parked right in front of Hasbro's building. And I said, let's give it a little time. And lo and behold, here come people out of the woodworks. They were coming from everywhere. And before we got into the Hasbro headquarters, I looked in, I saw all these guys in ties and suits, and just like shaking their heads, smiling and laughing and hitting each other like, I told you. So we go in and have this meeting, and of course everybody in the place is going crazy. And we had this meeting, and finally at the end I said, well, just you guys decide what you want to do. They said they wanted me to be their spokesperson, to be the first living G.I. Joe in their franchise of G.I. Joe. Everybody else was always an animated and a voice, but we want you to be our spokesperson. And I said, well, I'll give it some thought. But as I leave, I said, I just want you to know that I am the real G.I. Joe. This is me, Sergeant Slaughter. I am your real G.I. Joe. And so I left, and on the way back to Connecticut, where I was living at that time, we stopped to have dinner, and my attorney went to call his office and get his messages, and they said, Hasbro called, and they're ready to go. They want you to sign a contract. So we ended up doing the contracts, and I went to Vince McMahon, and I said, guess what? I got a great thing to tell you. What is it? I said, well, I just signed up a contract with Hasbro Toys. I'm going to be the first living G.I. Joe, be their spokesperson. What a great, combination this is going to be, a good tag team between your company and Hasbro. And he said, oh, that's great, Sarge. I'm happy for you, but I can't let you do that. And I said, why not? And he said, because I've got LJN, another toy company. I just signed them, and they're going to do all of our, action figures, and that'll be a conflict of interest. I said, oh, no. And he said, well, if you want to go to Hasbro, you go ahead, but I can't have you here at the same time. And he figured I would, stick with him. So I went home and talked to my wife, and I said, you know what? I can always be a wrestler, can't always be a G.I. Joe. And she said, yeah, that's true, but you have to make that decision. So I went back and told Vince, and he wasn't real happy about it, because we were just starting to work on WrestleMania 1. And I was going to be the main event against Hulk Hogan. So I kind of spoiled that, and I had to finally leave the WWE, and I went on my way with Hasbro and worked for a bunch of independent shows and for the AWA back where I started in Minneapolis. And so I went through 1985 or 84, 85 through 1990 with Hasbro, and finally the contract was over as far as a full-time contract. And I was sitting watching a NASCAR race one Sunday afternoon, and phone rang, and I said hello, and he said, Sarge? And I said, yes. And he goes, this is Vince. And there's only one Vince, and there's only one Sarge. So I said, hey, Vince, how you doing? He goes, I'm doing great. And WrestleMania 6 had just gotten over. And so he said, I had written him a note that I really thought that the show, the WrestleMania 6 I said I wasn't real happy, as far as the wrestling was going, but the production was one of the greatest I'd ever seen. So he thanked me for the note, and he said, I understand that your contract is over with Hasbro. I said, funny you would know that. And he said, well, I have my ways of finding out. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, are you ready to go back to work? And I said, yeah, I'm ready. He said, well, come by my house tomorrow. I got an idea. So I tell my wife and my children, my two daughters, that I'm going back to the WWE, and Vince McMahon's invited me to his house, and we're going to have a big meeting, and I'm sure that he's going to take Sergeant Slaughter, G.I. Joe, the real American hero, and make him the real American hero the way only Vince can do it. So I go there not knowing what's going on, and so finally he greets me, and we talk, and finally takes me into his library and shows me this layout of Los Angeles Coliseum. Seating for 104,000 fans. There was big screens all around, and I said, that's great. He said, that's where WrestleMania 7 is going to take place. And I said, oh, great. And he said, I want you and Hulk Hogan to headline it, because I want to break the record of Detroit's WrestleMania 3, which was 93,000. I want to make it 104,000. I said, I'm in, but how are we going to make Hulk a bad guy? And he goes, Hulk a bad guy? I said, yeah. I said, you aren't going to do something with G.I. Joe? He said, well, yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind. I said, well, what do you got in mind? He said, well, there's some problems over in the Middle East there, and yeah, we all knew that. So he said, Iraq overtook Kuwait, and this and that, and he goes through the whole thing. And he said, I want you to be an Iraqi sympathizer and put down America, saying how weak they are, how they can let a little country like Iran and Saddam Hussein run, the country and run the world. And so I'm listening to it, and yeah, that sounds like a pretty bad guy to. And he said, and here you are, a United States Marine and a former drill instructor, and you're going to go against America and against Hulk Hogan, who I'm going to portray as the Americana. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, well, you just go home and talk to your wife about it, because it could be a little rough. And I said, well, yeah, I'll talk to her. And so on my way home, I'm convinced that this is the way I'm going. I'm coming back as the villain, a real bad villain. So, of course, I get home and tell her. She said, you can't do that. You're crazy. You're going to get killed. And I said, oh, we'll do okay. So, of course, we started it. And kind of where you asked the question is, yeah, I came back as the Iraqi sympathizer under Vince's wishes. And I did everything that I possibly could to stir up the pot. And Vince said, you got full reins. If you get too far over the edge, I'll pull you back. And so I did everything I could. First, started real slow, coming back, doing vignettes and doing my promos about America being weak and how they could allow a general like Saddam Hussein be the leader of the world. And so we kept on, and I would bring birthday cakes into the ring when it was Saddam's birthday and ask people to stand up and sing happy birthday. And they were coming over the railings, and we kind of time it to where my opponent's music would play just as they were about to get into the ring. And we would do little things where I'd have the referee read a little paper that I wrote out that because I couldn't get on the microphone, they would drown me out. So I'd have the referee or the announcer make the announcement, and it was Sergeant Slaughter would like you all to stand up and give 10 seconds of silence because today is Veterans Day in Iraq, and he'd like you to give 10 seconds of silence to all the brave Iraqi soldiers who lost their lives in the overtake of Kuwait. And I mean, those people wanted to just, lynch me more or less and take me, and do whatever they could to me. But as I said, we would time it so the music would play and my opponent would come out. They would be satisfied with my opponent getting the best of me. So finally, Vince came to me because we were at that time running 2 shows in the same night. And he came to me and said, we got a little problem. And I said, what? And he said, Randy Savage is wrestling the Ultimate Warrior all around the country, and Randy broke his ankle. And I need to take you out of this nice, easy mold that you're doing and put you in with the Ultimate Warrior to finish Randy's bookings. And at that time, they were already into cage matches and all kinds of special stipulation matches. So I had to get in shape in a hurry. And so I got into matches with the Ultimate Warrior, went all around the country with the Ultimate Warrior, and in Miami, Florida at a Royal Rumble, I with the help of Randy hitting him with the scepter, beat the Ultimate Warrior for the title. And that night we did some promos and did some other things. And all of a sudden I'm standing there just kind of, off the camera, and Gene Okerlund's got a earpiece, and he's on the microphone, and they said, 3, 2, 1, and they started doing a promo, and he goes, just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Sergeant Slaughter is out back of the Miami arena burning the American flag. Could you believe that, ladies and gentlemen? And I went, what is he saying? And so I walked in front of the camera and said, cut. And they all went, what's going on? I said, nobody told me anything like this. And I'm not burning an American flag, and I don't want anybody to think that I was burning an American flag. So Vince came in and he goes, what's the matter? What's the matter? I said, I'm not burning an American flag. He said, no, you're not going to do it. We're just going to say you did. I said, no, you're not going to say I did anything. And I said, Vince, you're going to lose your stations. You're going to lose your sponsors. You're talking a whole different heat here now. That's people died for that red, white, and blue. You can't be doing that. And he kind of gave us some thought. He said, okay. I said, I tell you what we should do is, take Hogan's poster or T-shirts, and we'll say that's Americana. We'll put that on a flagpole, and I'll burn that. He goes, I like that even better. So down the road, we did all that. But that night that I won the title, I had my agent from New York City with me, and it was about 3:00 in the morning, and we had to catch flights. He was going back to New York, and I was going to Philadelphia. And we were hungry, so I said, let's stop and get something to eat. So I forget where it was. We stopped this little kind of a diner and walked in, and there wasn't many people in there. and kept sitting and sitting and sitting, waiting. Finally, I said to the waitress, "Could we get some service here?" And this guy comes out of the kitchen, and he's got a spatula in his hand. And he walks over to me, rolls up his sleeve. He's got a Marine Corps insignia tattooed on his arm. And he points the spatula at my agent. He said, "He can eat, you're not." And because he had watched the match that night on pay-per-view. And so I looked over to my agent. I said, "I think we ought to leave." He said, "I think so too." So anyway, we went our separate ways. I got to Philadelphia, and one of the agents that was running the show, I believe it was J.K. Strongbow, came up to me and said, "Sarge, how you doing?" I said, "Good." He said, "Congratulations." "Yeah, thanks." He said, "Have you talked to your wife today?" I said, "No, I haven't." And we didn't have cell phones back then. And he said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Was there something wrong?" He goes, "Well, I'd give her a call." And then so I said, "Oh, I'll go find a payphone." So as I went to leave, he goes, "Have you talked to Vince?" I said, "No, I haven't talked to Vince either." He said, "What? You might want to call him too." So I get to the payphone and dial and call my home. There's no answer. Leave a message. Call Vince, and he goes, "Hey, Sarge, how's everything going? Great show. I just got back, and I hope you're doing all right." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, we got a bit of a problem. Have you talked to your wife?" I said, "No, I haven't talked to my wife." I said, "Is there a problem?" And he goes, "Well, somebody called up the wrestling office today and this morning and said that they were going to kill you, but they were going to kill me. They're going to kill our families, going to blow up our houses, blow up the wrestling office, blow up our cars, blow up the WWE studios." So he said, "I thought it'd be a good idea for me to get a hold of your wife and have her leave the house for a while so I get some security over there." I said, "Yeah, well, thanks for doing that." And so finally I get a hold of my wife, and she starts kind of laughing. She says, "I told you this wasn't a good idea." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. So that started the whole ball of rolling of security. When I got home about 3 days later, I lived in a place in Connecticut where you could hardly even get a car up the driveway, much less a Winnebago. But I got up the top there, and there was a Winnebago, and I was like in shock that this thing was up there. I don't know how he got it up there, but and 4 gentlemen with suits on came over and opened up their suit coats and showed me they were packing weapons and that they were ordered to walk the perimeter of my property, which was about 4 acres of woods and hills and rocks. And I said, "Okay." And he said, "We've been told to go to school with your children and go to the supermarket or wherever your wife wants to go." And I said, "Oh boy." And we're going to go with you whenever you're leaving. So I went in and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you can go with me, but I don't think it's going to be so good with my wife." So I got in the house, and she's got the rolling pin in her hand and tapping her hand. And she said, "There's no security guards going to our schools, the children's school, and I'm not taking a security guard to the grocery store." And I said, "Yeah, I understand. I already told them pretty much that." So I left 2 days later, and I felt pretty secure that my family was safe. And but from that point on, I had 3 rental cars pretty much destroyed. So they started giving me a limousine to travel in, and I would when I would fly, I would never fly with other wrestlers, and I would usually fly in late, and when I would land at the airport, I would walk down the steps of the plane. I wouldn't go through the terminal, and a car would pick me up with 2 police cars following me to. Usually, I went to the hotel and I dressed, and then they would call me and tell me that we would do the matches where they would have intermission right after my match, so they could announce the next card. And so I would dress at the hotel, get picked up, go to the arena, wrestle. As soon as intermission started, I would get back in the car, go either back to the hotel or back to the airport, and nobody really saw me coming or going. So that's how we did it for quite a while, and it just got to be pretty rough, and we got finally into the Hulk Hogan part of the program, and we went pretty much around and around, and got to wrestle. We were heading for WrestleMania for that 104,000 seats, and Vince about 3 weeks before was told that he had to secure the Coliseum, which was going to be about $3 to $4 million, and he said, "No, we're not doing that. We'll just go inside." So all that hard work and all that abuse and everything that I went through stopped right there. We ended up having to go indoors to a 18,000 seat arena instead of 104,000, which was really the most disappointing part of the whole thing, because in my business, when you put SO next to your name, that means sold out. That's a big two letters, and that would have been quite a feather in my campaign cover to have done 104,000 people in LA. But we ended up having the biggest pay-per-view buy for many years, but it's been broken since.
I mean, you said that you were WWE champion. You headlined WrestleMania 7 against Hulk Hogan. Great career. You went into the Hall of Fame in 2004. And now you've had the opportunity to appear at some of the Tribute for the Troops and now serve as an ambassador. And in fact, back in July, you were in Raleigh for the SuperCon, and you have appearances almost every weekend around the country, signing autographs, answering questions. And since you first started the journey till now, how much do you like getting out there, meeting the fans, and hearing their memories of Sergeant Slaughter?
Well, it's incredibly fun, because wherever you go, whether it's Raleigh or L.A., people are coming up to you, and it's hard to believe that there's some fans that can't even see over the table. They're so small and young, but they know you because they watch the network. The WWE Network shows wrestling matches from the 70s and all through where they are today. And little children are fans of mine. I'm sure their parents show them the other matches of Sergeant Slaughter, not so much the Iraqi sympathizer, but they're smiling at me. They're not afraid of me, and the moms and the dads and the uncles and the aunts and the grandparents, and they're all huge fans. And they say, tell me about stories about when they first met me, or we were coming into a restaurant and you were there and you were so kind, you took pictures with us, and they showed me the pictures that they took with me from the 80s and 90s, and it's just every story. It just makes you feel so good that you made an impact, and being elected into the Hall of Fame, nominated, and was unanimously voted in by my peers, which is a great honor. And I was still actually wrestling at that time, so that was quite a double good thing, where I was into the Hall of Fame and still wrestling. And then we slid into the commissioner character for a while, and then I moved in and out, and finally became the ambassador. And they allow me to, I still am under contract with WWE, and they allow me to do Comic-Cons and WrestleFests and WrestleCons and get out and meet all the great fans. In fact, I'll be in Burlington, North Carolina on November 24th at the Holly Hill Mall. They're having a big Comic-Con there, and they invited me to be there. That's going to be a lot of fun, but just you go all over, not only the United States, but all over the world, and it's the same response. And, we were more storytellers than it is today. And although it's really fun to watch, and I enjoy watching it today, it's a little faster pace than we were, and it's a little bit harder to follow. But it's still, fun to just go out and be recognized and kind of, when so many, I've had so many veterans. I visit a lot of veterans hospitals, and I go to children's hospitals, and do a lot of charity work, and MDA, Make-A-Wish, and Cancer Society, and WWE works a lot with cancer, breast cancer, and awareness, and Connor's Cure, which is a pediatric cancer that they work for. Just get to meet so many people. But when you walk into a veterans hospital and a gentleman or a lady that served our country is in a bed or in a chair, and they see you come in and they want to actually stand up and give you a handshake or a hug or a salute, just makes you feel pretty damn good that what you did, really entertained not only myself, but everybody in the world.
And I know you and your wife are now settled in North Carolina, and you told me you might not follow sports as closely as you used to, but you did know that the NC State wrestling team finished a school best 4th place at the NCAA championships this past March, and you knew about Michael Macchiavelli winning an NCAA championship. And my question was going to be, you're a former amateur wrestler yourself. How much respect do you have for what our guys go through to get to that national stage?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, unless you are in their shoes, there's nothing quite like it, in my opinion, in all of sports, to be in that kind of shape, to get on a mat. It's one-on-one. It's you against your opponent, and it's school versus school. And being a heavyweight myself, a lot of times a meet would be up to me to win or lose. The meet. So there was a lot of pressure on the heavier weights, but it's just a sport that is hard to describe of what type of chess game it is. Amateur wrestling is a chess game. You have to know 2 or 3 moves ahead of what you're going to do and try to work that way to it. And just to watch it on television and see the success, how Michael had lost to his opponent, I think twice. Yeah, twice during the year, and then beat him in the championship. I mean, just brought goosebumps and made hair stand on my arms and my body, and it just incredible for his weight class, 197-pound weight class. That's a real man's weight class, and to do what he did, I'm not sure what he's doing now. I hope he's looking into maybe following Gerald Briscoe and get down to the Performance Center, because we sure could use him. Gerald Briscoe does we all basically all of us look for something because someone because we can only do it for so long, and then we have to get somebody else in there to keep it going. So I think Michael would be outstanding if he chooses to do it. I think he'd be an incredible performer in professional wrestling and sports entertainment. And but just to see what he went through and the sacrifice of a wrestler, amateur wrestler, high school, college. It's incredible what you have to sacrifice to, especially in your weight class. Heavyweight's not so much, but you still have to stay in shape. And but his weight class, 197. I mean, at his age, it's not easy to keep that weight at that certain weight and keep it going all the time. It's just a tremendous sacrifice to do what you love to do.
And this was such a great interview. First for the podcast, because we love getting to talk with different people that have ties to our program, but also for me on a personal level, is I watched so much WWF programming growing up, and Sergeant Slaughter was always one of the best wrestlers out there. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us and just giving us a great glimpse into your Hall of Fame career.
Well, it was great to be on with you. You never know who your fans are out there. You know, I've met 8 presidents, and they were all big WWE fans. Got invited to the White House twice, once by President Reagan and once by President Clinton. And it's just you just never know who your fans are out there. And it's great to talk with you. And I hope everybody that's listening will, when you get a chance to not only come and meet me, but if you get a chance to go to a professional wrestling event and get to a Wolfpack NC State wrestling event, please go, because it's the most entertaining sport in the world. And especially the Wolfpack, they're there to do one thing, and that's to win, and they need the fan support. And I know that they're packing them in, and look forward to one day being able to come and watch one.
Absolutely. We've talked. Your schedule's so busy, but we are going to get you to an NC State wrestling duel one of these days.
Be fun.
And how about giving us a proper Sergeant Slaughter sign-off?
Attention, North Carolina State Wolfpack. I want you to support your amateur wrestling program. Go out there and cheer them on. Help them to win. And that's in order. Don't make me come looking for you, maggots. You're dismissed.
The Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast is produced by the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, go to MatTalkOnline.com.